Hey everybody and welcome back. My name is Derek, author and webmaster of the Gematria calculator. In this video we're going to look at the numerology of the death of Rush drummer Neil Peart, considered by most experts to be one of, if not the greatest drummer of all time. Down in the description below this video, you'll see a link to my video on the Eclipse Crucifixion Code, which was my presentation that I put forth at the Anarchadelphia conference back in September. And in that presentation, I explain the crucifixion code from the ground up. We talk about murder rituals from famous musicians as far back as the 90s, for instance, Tupac and Biggie, all the way up through more recent ones like Chris Cornell, Chester Bennington, and then over the past year, Nipsey Hussle, XXXTentacion. Of course, on my channel, I also have a video on the death of Juice WRLD. All of these musicians dying by the code related to total solar eclipses, and I believe that understanding this code is paramount to discovering the true riddles lying in the numbers, both in Gematria, which we'll touch on in a second, and of course, date durations and date numerologies. So normally I touch on the eclipse code later on in my videos, but I'm actually going to talk about these eclipses at the very beginning, and I want you to think about today, January 10th, here in the year 2020. Today's date is the first eclipse of the year. They're calling this the Wolf Moon eclipse, and it's a penumbral lunar eclipse, one of 4 that are occurring this year. So, it should stand to reason that on the date of the first eclipse, we get news of the death of Neil Peart, who died entirely by the eclipse code. Now, even though Neil Peart died on the date January 7th, news of this death wasn't published until today, so they waited 3 days, and this is pretty uncommon when it comes to celebrities, particularly famous musicians, as Neil Peart undoubtedly was. So with that said, let's dive into the numerology here. So the first thing I want to point out is the birth date of Neil Peart. Notice how he was born on the date 9/12, the 12th of September. This date written with the digits 912. Last year, 2019, has these same digits, 1, 9, and 2. The year 2019 only had one total solar eclipse. Neil Peart, again, whose birthday is September 12th, on the date of that eclipse, was a span of 9 months and 21 days after his birthday. Again, the same digits, 9, 1, and 2. In the language of Gematria, a code of letters and numbers that assigns a number to each letter in the alphabet, 1 through 26, drummer Neil Peart has a value of 192. If you measure from the date of this only total solar eclipse in the year 2019 to the date of today's news story on January 10th of 2020, you get exactly 192 days. Remember, they waited 3 days to report this. In Latin Gematria, also called Jewish on my website, this cipher based in the Latin alphabet with more modern English characters placed at the end, and I continuously say this is the most significant one outside of the base 4. Well, notice how the word eclipse gives us this value of 192. Again, today's news, 192 days after the eclipse. When you drop the Jewish cipher down to an ordinal base, 1 through 27, the word eclipse instead sums to 66. Neil Peart was born in the year 1952, meaning that on the date of last year's eclipse, he was 66 years old. His death was on January 7th, 3 days ago, which was a span of 6 months and 6 days after the eclipse, which again equals 66. And using the standard alphabetic order, The band that he was the drummer for, Rush, gives us an ordinal value of 66. Once again, looking at this 66, and before I do, one last thing I want to point out that I didn't put in the post is that this eclipse from last year, the one he died in relation to, was on July 2nd, the date written internationally as 2/7. Measuring from that date to his death was 27 weeks. Now, this was also a span of 190 days. This also a significant number. Solar eclipse equals 190. Peart had birth numerology of 19, and we'll look at every single one of these other numbers in a minute. I also want to point out look how old he was. Wow, this just gets better. This is how old he was on the date of that eclipse last year, 24,400. Well, of course, Gematria, coming from the Hebrew language, and it's worth pointing out that the word kill in Hebrew Gematria sums to 244. And this was leading into me talking about the number 19. 19 equals 244 in Jewish Gematria. Solar eclipse 190, died 190 days later. Now, the 19th prime number is 67. The phrase total solar eclipse equals 67. This is the same as blood sacrifice and human sacrifice, 67 in the same reduction method, using the rules of numerology to reduce each double-digit number to a single digit. Notice how Rush drummer also sums to 67 in the reverse order. And on the date of his death, he was 67 years old. His death fell a span of 118 days after his birthday. The word death sums to 118 in Jewish Gematria. Death also sums to 38, a significant number also found in the Gematria of killing and murder, 38. Notice how his birth numerology even had the number 38 in addition to the number 92, just like how drummer sums to 92 and 38. Interestingly enough, this death also appears to possibly be related to the frontman of Rush, Geddy Lee. The name Geddy Lee equals 67, the age at which Neil Peart died. And looking at Geddy Lee's birthday, which I believe was July 29th, this gives us a span of 163 days, which is the 38th prime number. A couple more thoughts about why this news was delayed. Obviously, this ties into the eclipse riddle, but it's also worth pointing out that the date that Peart was born leaves 110 days in the year, September 12th. Using prime numbers, a cipher based in ordinal but only with associated primes, the word death equals 110. Of course, news delayed until 110 to report this. And he died in the city of Santa Monica, California, and Santa Monica giving us the 110. Also the 38, which obviously was big, death, drummer 38. 187, the homicide code, Santa Monica. So Peart's death fell on the date January 7th, written 1/7. This is the English gematria of kill, 17. And we saw how the Hebrew value of kill tied into his age on the date of the eclipse. Kill also equals 44 in the alphabetic order. So this makes it interesting that he died of brain cancer. Brain sums to 44. Cancer sums to 44. The treatment for cancer, which is ultimately what does kill a lot of people, is chemo, also 44. Now, earlier you might have noticed, if you're sharp, that total solar eclipse equals 704. Peart's death was from brain cancer, which equals 74. And interestingly enough, the band Rush released its first album in the year 74. There does appear to be a little riddle here. Neil Peart has died in the 46th year, so from 1974 to 2020. This would be 46 years later. The word sacrifice equals 46, just like the name Neil Peart. Now in ordinal, sacrifice yields a 73. This is the same as the reduction value of ritual sacrifice. 73, another related number found in Neil Peart's birth numerology. And then what I also noticed is that Rush's final album was called Clockwork Angels. And this is kind of an interesting album name to begin with, especially in regards to dying by the numbers. You know, angels working by the clockwork, something to that effect. Anyway, this one was released on June 12th of 2012. And if you measure from that date to Neil Peart's death, you get a span of exactly 7 years and 30 weeks. So that number wasn't difficult to find. A couple other minor things here, but I really wanted to drive home how the eclipse code is once again heavily present in the death of Neil Peart. So thanks for chiming in, guys. Once again, appreciate all your love and support. Peace, love, God bless, and we'll talk to you next time. See ya.